It's an honor for me to introduce the next speaker, Cyrilo Helmus. It's a funny story because I actually know him from 14 years ago, and we both really looking for what we wanted to do in life. I think we could relate as youngsters who were quite searching for what we wanted to do, and we were always making music. We were in adult education to finish our high school degree, and now 14 years later, through Camilla, one of our mentors, we met each other again in the mentoring context. So it's an honor for me to introduce Cyrilo, very creative man.
Thank you. Oh, yeah,
If you
perfect.
prefer to move around.
I'll explore my options, guys. It's on. Check. Can everybody hear me? Also in the back? Yeah. All right. Well, I'll just try this microphone first. I'm used to having a lavalier or this mic, but might be a little bit awkward speaking like this. So I'm just gonna keep it like this. My name is Cyrilo. Thanks for the introduction. Well, to talk a little bit about myself, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an artist, like my friend already said here. I'm in music, but due to Corona, of course, I had to innovate myself a little bit, which means I also started a production house 2 years ago called Safari Media, where I also do audio production. And basically, what that means is I do audio production in voiceovers, podcasting, but also anything related to music. And I've worked with Emmy award-winning artists and Grammy-nominated cinematographers, or the other way around, actually, Grammy award-winning artists and Emmy-nominated cinematographers, as well as platinum-selling artists. So that was a real blessing and a real roller coaster, I must say. But today I'm here to talk to you guys about mentoring, of course. This is why we're already here. I'm a mentee, first and foremost, for years. I've been a mentee for almost a decade now, or longer maybe even. And I'm also a mentor, student mentor, but also a talent mentor. I mentor some artists as well, because I realized that, sometimes coaching or managing is very handy for artists, but it's also good to develop the personal and professional side of things so you can develop as a whole person. So first of all, by show of hands, how many of you are a mentor or have had a mentor? Let's start with that. How many of you had a mentor themselves? All right, I see quite some hands. And I see also that some of you are mentors themselves. I think that mentorship is really important, of course. And for those of you who are mentors, I have the question, how many of you have heard this following sentence? So you're a mentor. Oh, so you're a coach. I think you all know that sentence, right? Well, I think there's a subtle difference between being a coach and being a mentor. See, a coach can be a mentor, but a mentor is not always a coach, right? And that's a very subtle difference that a lot of people around the world maybe don't really understand yet or don't grasp. They don't know the purpose of what a mentor is. So today I want to talk about 3 layers of mentoring through my own life experiences. And I hope that it brings to you a little bit of maybe something you can take home. So of course, first, I don't know because I wasn't there yesterday, but you might have heard this quote already. It's from the astrophysicist Isaac Newton. You might have heard about him. He said very famously, of course he's famous for a lot of things, but he's also famous for the saying, if I was able to look further, it's because I was able to stand on the shoulders of giants. And what does that mean? Of course, when you are able to look further, you have a better reach. So I would like to say that if you're able to reach further, that means that you're able to stand on the shoulders of giants. And with that, I want to start about the 3 layers of mentorship through my own life. I had a lot of experiences, and I want to start actually before I was born, because that's where the story really begins. So the first layer is unconscious mentorship. That's what I like to call it. And I want to also thank Sean Blachard for this. He helped me really defining this. And unconscious mentorship is basically the things that we see throughout the day. So the influence that we get from people, our environment, and ideas and impulses from around us from the moment that we open our eyes right until the moment that we close them again. So that means that there's a lot going on in life, and usually we don't always understand or are conscious about the impulses or the lessons that we're being taught. But I'd like to describe it as such. It's kind of like the famous saying, you have to play the game with the cards you're dealt, right? So we all get a certain card deck in our hands, and we don't decide what cards we get in our hands, but based upon the hand that we get dealt, we have to, of course, learn to play the game that way. So my mother, she is from the ghetto. And when I mean the ghetto, that's really the ghetto, and I will explain that in a further moment. My father is from a village, a small village, and you can understand that they both had very different lives. So to talk about my mother, how did she get there? My mother was born right when my grandfather and grandmother actually came here. My grandfather was a soldier in the colonial army for the Netherlands, and right after the war, they were all brought over to the Netherlands temporarily for 3 months because there was some political turmoil. The Netherlands was recovering from the war, and they had to figure things out. Now, to make a long story short, I'm still making the best out of those 3 months today. And my sister has 2 twins just born, so you can imagine that we're really stretching that moment so far. And which is not really by choice, and that caused my mother to grow up in a really uncertain household, a military household. And also, she was actually raised in the same building that Anne Frank spent her last moments of life. So the living conditions were not really what we like to enjoy today. But you can imagine that that brought with it some trauma, and that trauma also trickled down to me as a kid. I didn't always understand that, what it came from, where it came from. I had to find that out myself. And that's basically the deck that I was dealt. Now, growing up, I became really militant as a young kid, really almost activistic. I wanted to find my role in life, my position in life. And all the impulses that I got were all, I didn't understand them all, so I had to make sense of them. And which means that when I was around 13, 14, my mother went to a retreat to the motherland to basically, well, try to get some spiritual healing, right? So she went away for a year, which turned out to be 2 years actually, because she needed some more time. There was a lot of things that she had to heal from. But during those times, I didn't really understand why she had to go, because I wasn't told the whole story. I'd never met my grandfather. My grandmother never talked about it. Of course, it was like a taboo in the family. You just don't talk about the war and the times after. So with unconscious mentorship, you have the 3 options with that deck you're dealt. You get good examples, you get bad examples, and if you're really lucky, you get really good bad examples, which I got all 3 of them, I must say. Because my mother was gone, my father had to work all day, so most of the day when I came home from work, or from school at that time, I had the whole house to myself. And, the house, after a couple of years, you already know everything that's in the house, so you go outside. Outside, I met a group of friends at that time who were also we also had a lot of time outside, so, like attracts like. And we hung around in the street a lot, and we made music, we started freestyling on the streets. And that created a bond, because through music we could tell our story with each other. After a while, I noticed that some of the friends that I was hanging around with were making a lot of money. They were always wearing the newest shoes, and they always had the newest gear. And at some point, you just hang around with them a little too much because you want to find out, how did they do that? And at some point, a friend of mine, he showed me how he made that money. Of course, at the age of 14, you don't make that by working at Foot Lockers. So he did some other things, and he showed me how he did that. And we had a really big discussion because I was also in school back then. He actually already kind of gave up on that idea. And we got involved into some really gnarly stuff. I got to say, I never really backed what he was doing. But at some point, I was just focused on trying to get my school back together. And I went to his house afterwards to do some homework together with him. And of course, he was working at the same time. At some point, he went outside to the front door, and he asked me if I could also spot for him. At that moment, there was a black Mercedes rolling up, and the window rolled down, and I was looking down the barrel of a gun. And it was at that moment that I realized that maybe I should change the plan a little bit for my future. So you got to understand that at that moment, we had a long talk, me and my friend, and I basically told him, I don't know how you see the future, but for me, I see something different. And basically what he told me then is that maybe I should really consider pursuing this music thing. I really had talent. And he said, this life is for people maybe who don't have other options. Because I got to tell you one thing about my friends. Maybe they didn't make the right choices, but they were very street smart. And they really knew how to be entrepreneurs. So what I learned from them at that time already, as an example, was not only that bad choices can be made, but also that you can learn a lot from being entrepreneurial. And I'm really glad to say that that specific friend right now is a chef cock today, like a chef, sorry. That's Dutch word, not everybody will understand. A chef, off the record. And he's actually also doing really fine in life, and he learned, and he has his own business actually. And I bet you that it's not because of necessarily the school, but because of the street education that he got. So, at some point I started focusing on music, and I got involved with more musical related people. And how many of you are familiar with the rule of five, like the connection of five? Everybody's connected through 5 or 6 handshakes, right? So at some point I was just helping a friend out at a sneaker store. He just opened his own sneaker store, and he asked me to do the opening promotion, to basically do some music, get some people in. And at some point he brings this really nice sneaker to me, and he's like, "Hey man, I need you to sell me this, like sell this sneaker for me." And I'm like, "Hey, I'm not here to work on a sneaker, right? So why do you want me to sell it? I don't know how to sell something." So he said, "Just hold it for me, I'll be right back." And this is where basically my transition from unconscious mentoring to the second phase comes in, which is conscious mentoring. The moment that he comes back, I don't know if you guys know Tupac, but he's a very big inspiration to me. Basically, Tupac was rolling with a group of friends who were called the Outlaws. It's his rap group that he took on, and he really made his last music with them. So I'm holding this sneaker in my hand, and I see the Outlaws walking into the store here in the city of Leeuwarden, like a small city. And my brain just errors, right? Like, how are these people from California walking in, that I know all the lyrics of, walking inside this store? Now, for those of you who are not really familiar with Tupac, Tupac made over 700 million records. And, he sold over 700 million records. He made 7 albums. He directed 5 movies. He played in 2 more. And by the time he died at the age of 25, he still had 5 albums ready to be released. So he was a really hardworking man. And if you can learn anything about work ethic, I invite you to explore his life. The good, bad, and the ugly, right? So anyway, the Outlaws, they came into the store, and the first thing this man does is he points at the shoe, and he's like, "I've been looking for that sneaker all over the world." And he walks up to me. I'm just stunned holding the sneaker, right? And I don't know what to say. And but we end up talking. And, I had so many questions. Everybody wants to know, well, what happened, there's a big mystery surrounding all of it. And basically, he told me a lot about his personal connection to Tupac. And he showed me the tattoo, which has the cover of the last album that Tupac made on his arm. And he tells me the whole story about his personal connection to Tupac. And before he goes, he thanks me, of course, for selling him the sneaker, which, I worked very hard for, of course. But then he asked me, like, "I want you to shake my hand, right?" So I shake his hand, and then he says, "You're now 1 handshake removed from Tupac Shakur." And for me, that was the moment that realization dropped, right? Like, oh my God, this guy is living such a conscious life. He's setting out a path, and even after Tupac is gone, he's continuing the legacy of this man. And I wanted to be like that. So at that moment, I started to look for more conscious stimuli in my life, and I wanted to really take direction over my life. And that's when a friend of mine, who's a very famous stunt guy and a free runner, he asked me to help out with a workshop he was doing for his school assignment. And that's when I met my mentor. And I want to tell you, she's a power lady. And even though she goes through a lot, she still managed to be here. She's sitting right in the back, Kamila Gorzinska. Give her a round of applause. So yeah, thank you. And I was basically introduced to her through that workshop. She was basically bossing my friend around, a friend who I was really rebellious, and he was always had the last word. And he was just walking around and doing everything, and she was just pointing him into direction. I was like, oh my God, what is this power, What is this? This is magical. And so after the workshop was done, there was still a group of people that was left, and there was something that didn't quite work. So I basically approached Camilla. I asked, like, what should we do? And she just came up right on the spot with a solution, like, maybe we should try this. We did an extra workshop for a group of students, and it was like a huge success. Everybody was really enthusiastic. So I thought I wanted more. I want more of this. I want part of the action. So I basically kept contact with Camilla, and as part of like a natural mentoring progress, I kind of got in touch with her. I stayed in touch with her, and it's been almost 12 years now, I think, 12 years, something like that, maybe more. And and through that conscious mentorship, you got to understand you have two types. Again, you have informal mentorship and you have formal mentorship. Now, the informal mentorship was, of course, my friend, the guy that has the shoe store, the friend that introduced me to my mentor. I call them friend-tors because once you become conscious, you don't pick your friends because you like to hang around with them. Of course, you have to have an energy, but you also pick consciously your friends because of what they can teach you, they can offer you, right? And finally, the formal mentorship is the type that I got from Camilla. And formal mentors come in three ways. And this is where, of course, why I brought up the topic of coaching, because coaching is different significantly from this between mentorship. You have the first layer of formal mentorship, I like to say as, examples. Those are people you can just watch, you can follow them. They can be your idols, your favorite artist, your music star that you admire very much, or the boss at your work. The second layer is more of a director. So those are the people that are directly involved in your life, and they give you directions, and they support your ideas. But what you really want to reach is the final layer, of course, and that's sponsorship, sponsors. And sponsors are those who don't just believe in your ideas, they believe in you. They're willing to put their name beside your name, right? And the way that it works is kind of like, they give you a baton. And if you're not ready to get that baton handed, of course you're going to screw up, you're going to fall. And we've seen it a lot as mentors where you give somebody the baton and they don't pick it up. That just happens. But sometimes they do pick it up. And when they pick it up, that's like a really impressive moment, right? You're just watching them and you're watching them go. You're like, man, let's try that again. See what we can do again. So now we're moving to the final layer. And the final layer is passing the baton, and it's creating consciousness. So I have a mentee right now, and my mentee was Chris. I met her almost 10 years ago. And when I met her, it was at a workshop, and she basically was a dancer, but she was still in high school, and she wasn't really motivated. And back home, it didn't really go that well. She was also from a bit of a chaotic family, and her family didn't really believe in her dreams, which was to be a dancer. So she actually performed at the halftime show of a performance that I did. And when I was almost ready to finish, she approached me and she was like, I want to learn how to perform like you, because I had a certain presence, and she wanted also to learn to sing. So I gave her some singing lessons. And 1 minute, guys, so I'm going to keep it short. But so I gave her some singing lessons, and then she told me her dream was that she wanted to actually audition for Lucia Martis, which is the top dancing academy in the Netherlands. It's basically the top tier. But what I got from her signals is what she wasn't really doing well in school. She was, taunting school. She was talking down on it, and of course she was young, she was rebellious, but I told her directly then, like, hey, if you're going to school with that attitude, you can't make the dreams you want. You got to invest in the things you want now if you want to pick the fruits later. So we sat down and we set on a trajectory, and finally she calls me up about half a year later, and she says, guess what? I'm like, what? And she told me she got into Lucia Martis, so she made the audition. And that was the moment, yes, thank you. That was the moment that creating consciousness comes in. So I went from, conscious mentoring to creating consciousness. But it works both ways because, again, when she told me that news, that was me creating consciousness for her that she could do things. About a year later, I didn't have that much contact with her. She was in school. Then, the moment that we had contact, she told me, you know what? I just met somebody, and she was an aspiring model, and she said, you know what? I was just so sympathetic for her situation. I wanted to help her out. So she did, and she got her actually a modeling gig because of her own network that she built up as a dancer and an actress during her career. So the final layer is passing the baton and creating consciousness. And in those three layers, I would like to give you maybe a little bit of like a scientific method to describe the difference between coaching and mentoring. So the next time you get that question, you know the difference, and I hope they learn too. My name is Cyrilo. Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you. Is my microphone working? Yeah, it's working. Thank you very much, Cyrilo, for sharing your powerful story, your personal story about taking control over your life. And I think the power of sharing stories is something that Jean-Marie taught us about too. And you're the second person who taught us how important it is to take control of your life and to tell the stories. I also really like the term friendtor. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to use it. Okay, nice, nice. Well.